Hey everybody! Before we begin, I just wanted to drop a quick content warning. This video will mention and feature footage of real and simulated violence against rabbits, the mishandling of rabbits, experimentation on rabbits, and animal abuse in cinema. If you're sensitive to any of these subjects, this review of Night of the Lepus may not be for you, and I suggest checking out any of our other Sunday Bunday videos featured on this channel. Thank you. Hey everybody, I'm Brian here for another Sunday Bunday, and today we're looking at a pretty interesting one. Rabbits in film tend to have a whimsical or mischievous nature to them, and if they're depicted as vicious or cruel, it's rarely played straight. Their brutality is meant to contrast so heavily with their undeniably fluffy cuteness that it becomes the joke.
There he is. Where? There. What, behind the rabbit?
The idea of a vicious rabbit is in and of itself funny, and not meant to be taken as a serious threat. But what happens when you do try and play it straight? What happens when you build a monster movie around the idea of killer bunnies? Well, you get this early 70s bit of horror cult classic, Night of the Lepus. Night of the Lepus opens with newsreel footage from Australia and the American South of rabbit populations completely run amok, and causing serious problems for farmers and ranchers. And it's pretty distressing to watch as a rabbit owner. You can very clearly see panicked and scared bunnies running headfirst into fences, frantically trying to escape, and being very improperly handled.
It's difficult to conceive that such an innocent furry rabbit can be so destructive. Can this population explosion be contained?
And I get it. I understand that there are certain parts of the world and certain cultures that do not view this as an incredibly cute and adorable little buddy that deserves all the love and affection in the world. They see a dangerous pest that could potentially ruin their livelihood, and maybe a few USB cables. Still, I was barely 5 minutes into this film and already feeling like I wasn't going to have a very good time. Thankfully, that's about as horrific as Night of the Lepus actually gets. There'll be a couple other moments later of rabbits being improperly handled, and there's a scene with rabbits being experimented on in a science lab, but with the worst behind us, let's move on to the plot. Which, in case you couldn't tell from the opening newsreel footage, it's about the overpopulation of rabbits threatening ranchers and farmers in the American Southwest. Arizona, specifically. They didn't even have the subtlety to have the news report playing in the background of some innocuous introduction as the opening credits play. Just bam! Front and center. Here is the news, here is the plot.
Or any air, for that matter. Will there be enough room to live in, and enough food to feed an ever-increasing...
Who cares? Do you mind? Yeah, I mind. You won't make something of it?
Ranch owner Cole Hillman doesn't want to resort to poisoning the rabbits infesting his property because of the lasting effects it would have on his land as well as the other wildlife. He enlists the help of a couple zoologists, Roy and Jerry Bennett, for ideas. Their proposed solution is to introduce a few rabbits injected with a hormone serum meant to increase the possibility of birth defects and slow down the rabbits' breeding cycles. I mean, it seems like a pretty sound, safe, long-term idea. So where does it go wrong? Well, their initial run with the serum didn't exactly have the outcome they were looking for. A weird side effect, too, is that the infected rabbits they had in their lab begin to kind of grow larger and more quickly than expected. So where did it really go wrong? These two. Oh my god, these two children! Amanda Bennett and Jackie Hillman. First, because Amanda likes a particular bun named Romeo, she wants to keep him as a pet. The problem, though, is that Romeo's already part of her parents' experiments to find a proper serum that will help Cole's rabbit problem. So what does she do? She switches out Romeo for a similar-looking rabbit in the control group and then begs her parents to take a control group rabbit as a pet. All the while, Roy is literally talking about how dangerous it would be for one of these infected rabbits to escape before they properly understood the effects of their experimental serum.
You see, Cole, we have to keep a tight control on these test rabbits. Heaven help us if any of them should get away before we know the effects of this new serum.
And then Jackie. Ugh, Jackie, I hate his stupid face. He steals Romeo right out of Amanda's arms and
Threw it on the ground.
because he's not part of your system, man, or something. Actually, it's because he's just a jerk. Like, even if Romeo wasn't some dangerously infected rabbit with some experimental serum, that was, like, still Amanda's pet that he just stole from her and then made it run away. These kids don't even realize that they've just caused the death of so many people. Just, these kids and the, I just want to. So we've been going through this movie for a little bit, and I feel like we need to really address something that comes across quite strongly when it comes to Night of the Lepus. It's that it doesn't really feel like a horror movie, does it? And there's good reason for that. Nearly everyone involved in this movie, from producer A.C. Lyles, director William Claxton, the actors, the extras, the crew, they're not horror movie people. An absurdly strong majority of everyone's experience was in making Western films, and it shows. Night of the Lepus is shot like a Western. It looks like a Western. It's filmed on a Western movie set. It doesn't fall into the popular trappings and tropes of other horror movies of the time. It doesn't really make use of horror movie angles. The soundtrack isn't really used to build tension towards scares. The only one here with noticeable recognition from the world of horror is Janet Leigh for her work in Psycho. Night of the Lepus is less of a horror movie and more like a Western fantasy. And we're about to see just how fantastical it gets. It's the big reveal. Jackie and Amanda visit an old prospector's mine to see Jackie's friend Billy. While Jackie's checking out Billy's shack, she sends Amanda into the mine because, again, Jackie's just an absolute jerk. And then inside, she finds Billy and those are some cute buns. But you know, they tried. The close-ups are pretty good. The sound design is a nice attempt to make them at least sound gruesome. I mean, smearing ketchup on their faces to simulate blood, it looks a little silly, but Unfortunately, the way it's presented in this scene, though, you don't really get any sense of the rabbit's size. It's only later you find out that these evil, flesh-eating rabbits are roughly wolf-sized.
But, Doctor, rabbits as big and as ferocious as wolves? It is inconceivable.
From this point forward, the plot of Night of the Lepus follows a pretty typical 1950s monster movie formula. Our killer buns wreak havoc for the next third of the movie across these small Arizona towns, leaving a trail of bodies until the military is called in and our largely one-dimensional protagonists create an ingenious trap to quell the beasts for good. Or do they? Nah, they do. There hasn't been a sequel to Night of the Lepus. So instead of going in depth on plot and characters, how about we talk about them buns, though? The first thing you'll notice, these are clearly domestic bunnies that they're using in Night of the Lepus. They actually try to justify this with a quick throwaway line about how the particular fluffle on Cole's land are descendants of rabbits that escaped from a hutch at a nearby farm.
There was a fellow that lived south of here about 10 miles. He used to raise domestic rabbits. But he had a fire, and a couple of hundred of them got away.
So these are mongrels.
Still, it does not help the look of your monsters. Don't get me wrong, wild bunnies are just as adorable, but their more angular face and body shape, the coloring of their fur, shorter ears, I mean, Ultimately, your movie is still about killer bunnies, but at least it'd look ever so slightly more convincing than these fluffy round buns. Seriously, there are instances where I could just like drop a clip of Foley into this movie and it wouldn't even look weird. Okay, maybe it looks a little weird. Shut up! The rabbits are presented in 3 different ways. Anytime you see rabbits attacking a human, it's a guy in a fursuit. Anytime you see rabbits being attacked, it's a puppet. The rest, 90% slow motion footage of rabbits running over miniature sets built for them to trample over. If you're going to watch Night of the Lepus, get ready to watch a ton of footage of rabbits running in slow motion. And let me just say, Night of the Lepus features some of the most amazing looking miniature sets that I've ever seen in a movie before. Seriously, they look incredible. Whether they're on the road or in fields or attacking a homestead, the miniature work put into this film should not be overlooked. Probably why they ended up using so much footage of it. They're some of the best shots the movie has to offer. Alongside the camp and the novelty, it's one of the definite highlights of this film. It does make for a couple minor inconsistencies, though. The rabbits are initially described as being wolf-sized, and when they're attacking people in fursuits, yeah, that's a pretty accurate description. But once you see them against models, they're scaled up to being anywhere from cow-sized rabbits to as large as a truck. The movie doesn't really address it either. You could chalk it up to the rabbits are constantly growing, but their sizes vary too much from scene to scene for that to really make sense. And with all that said, how about some final thoughts on Night of the Lepus? There was nothing that could save Night of the Lepus from the fact that they tried to make a horror movie out of killer bunnies. The marketing team even went so far as to change the name of the movie from its original title, Rabbits, and then also not feature bunnies anywhere on the movie poster. Obviously, that did not help. Still, there is a charm to this movie. Again, it cannot be stated enough. Night of the Lepus barely resembles a horror movie because of all the Western film influence from literally everyone involved in making it. It looks like a Western, it sounds like a Western, it feels like a Western, they just made a Western. It just happens to be a Western with giant killer bunnies, but it's still a Western, and it's wonderful. The movie is shot incredibly well, and I'm not just talking about the rabbits over miniatures again either. Like, this is an exceptionally good-looking movie. And I just wanted to take a second to kind of walk you through one of my favorite, just little moments in this movie that made it incredibly special to me. There's a part, probably 2/3 of the way through the movie, where rabbits have attacked Cole's homestead, and he survived the night. So he leaves his home, and he's out on the road because they destroyed his vehicles. He can't make any phone calls because the power's down. So he's on the road, and he's got his gun, just in case the rabbits come to attack him while he's on the road. And he's trying to flag down a speeding car with his gun in his hand, just trying to flag down a car, and the car goes speeding by him like, nope. And Cole's like, but I need help. And then he just looks at his gun, and it's just the slow moment of realization of, oh, I probably look like a crazy person. And he throws his gun away and flags down the next car, and the car stops for him, of course. It's just one of these little moments that I just absolutely loved from this movie. And Night of the Lepus has a ton of these little silly moments. Some intentional, mostly not. And then the last thing that I really wanted to touch on with this movie is what it was like watching Night of the Lepus as a rabbit owner. You over there on the other side of the screen, if you've made it this far into watching this video, you'll probably be okay giving the movie a watch too. I understand Night of the Lepus was filmed almost half a century ago, and animal rights in film wasn't nearly what it is today, but still, the first 10 minutes or so, the movie can be a little rough. And knowing that the rabbits in all those beautiful slow motion shots were actually scared into running by trainers banging pots and pans certainly doesn't make it any better. At the same time, later in the movie, I found myself chuckling a little bit at the idea that Night of the Lepus is so unrealistic. Not because it's about giant killer bunnies, but because I hadn't seen a single shot of a giant killer bunny chewing on some wires. Because let's face it, no wire would be left unchewed. Right, Foley? Look at him over there. Pretending he didn't once get behind my computer desk and destroy like 5 USB cables, 3 HDMI, the power cable to my PlayStation TV. They don't make PlayStation TVs anymore, Foley. Took me a while to replace that cable. Night of the Lepus is fun and campy and ridiculous. And while the execution was poor, I love the idea that there is a movie where my favorite animal gets to be the big evil baddie terrorizing Arizona while never sacrificing their complete adorableness. Other than the obvious animal abuse that went into making this movie possible, the only other negative I wanted to mention was the movie makes some obvious use of stock footage. They only went to that well a couple times, but because Night of the Lepus looks as good as it does, their use of stock is noticeably bad. And it sucks. I couldn't imagine using stock footage on such a beautiful looking movie. I mean, even here on Sunday Bunday, we're firmly against reusing footage just because it'd be easier. I pride myself on my integrity as a content creator in bringing my best with every video that I put out. So I'll see you next time for another Sunday Bunday, and I can't wait.
We await your return, warrior.